I started playing football in Geelong, other than school footy, which was in Horsham, country town Horsham. In 1969, when I came to Geelong, I played with Thompson under 18s. I missed the first 3 games. Runner-up in the best and fairest, and God only knows how I did that. 6'8" helped, I think. Then I moved to the seniors the next year, played crap in all the practice games, and the ball came to me like a magnet in the first senior game, and had a reasonable season. I thought Lester Gladman, the coach, he was probably my favourite to win the best and fairest, and I beat him by a vote, I think. Very lucky, I would have said. Then in 1970, I went across to, I got invited to Geelong, like anyone in the district that won a best and fairest, got invited across to Geelong. Played 3 reserve grade games, and then while I was playing for the Gordon Institute of Technology, busted a thumb and spent 6 weeks out. I came back to play footy, didn't tell Geelong anything, and I played a game with Thompson. They talked me into it, the naive, gullible young lad that I was, and I think I had probably 15 marks and kicked 1 goal 8 from about 15 metres out. So I didn't have a good day, and then I got censured by the Geelong Football Club and basically exiled for the year. Managed to play in the finals that year with Geelong in the preliminary final, got done. Vowed I'd make a commitment, if ever played in another final, I wouldn't stop running until the game finished. I had a bit of a rest in the 3rd quarter, and the other side got in front, and we never got it back. In 1972, Billy Goggin invited me down to Geelong West, and I was still pretty naive in the ways of football, and I played with a bunch of great blokes who, strangely enough, we didn't lose a game that year. And I suppose the thing I remember about that year most was the games against Caulfield. Every game we played them, they got a bit closer, and we beat them, I think, by 4 points in the granny. It was a great team effort. Won the preliminary final by a kick after the siren. Alex Angelkovic, been on the ground 30 seconds. Phil Evans took 4 bounces up, lined up the goals, went off the side of his boot, and Alex takes a mark 20 metres out directly in front. And when he kicked the ball, the divot went through the goals before the ball did. So Caulfield players would all run out of the goal, so it was a clear goal. Mightn't have been if they'd been in the goal square. And then we moved on to the next year with Geelong West. We played we got promoted to 1st Division, and we played a reasonable season. We played in a Lightning Premiership and won that, which wasn't a bad effort. And the next year, in 74, the year I got married, we made the preliminary finals against Oakley and got done by 12 points, I think it was, in the finish. We came back at them at one stage, and I let the team down, kicked a point, and we lost our momentum, and they kept it going. But I think the thing that impressed me most out of that loss was the coach's attitude. Billy Goggin, I mean, I thought we had a number of players that played pretty well, but Billy said after the game, now you've got to explain to the fans why you lost that one, and you've got to wait another year to get another chance at it. So in 1975 we started pretty well. Don't think we lost a lot of games during the year, but we finished on a high note by beating Dandenong in the grand final. And I suppose I didn't think I'd played all that well all year. I was sort of up and down, had good games, had some pretty crappy games. Goggin, I think, actually dropped me for a game that year, and I ended up winning the best and fairest from Tony Gilmore by 1 or 2 votes. And Tony should have won it. He was clearly the best man in the club. So I never forgot that. And I always felt sorry for Tony because he was so consistent during the year, and probably missed votes because he was consistent. The next year I got invited to play with Geelong. I played 6 games, did my hamstring, spent a lot of time out, and I really wasn't enjoying it there too much. The next stayed another year, and I I can't remember how many games I played. It wasn't over 10 anyway. And then by the time 1976, was it 78 came around, I'd I'd bulked up a bit. I was probably about 108, 110 kilos by then. And I had a fairly successful year with the club at Geelong. We made the finals, and I sat on the bench for the finals, both finals games. Got a bit of a run at Foots when we played at Waverley, and we won. Wasn't particularly involved in the game, and we played North Melbourne at the MCG, and I sat on the bench for 3 quarters and half the last quarter, and came on, had 7 possessions and playing angry because I didn't get a run. We clearly got beaten by a better side on the day, and that was the end of my career at Geelong, essentially. Went to Tassie coaching, played for Cooey, and we missed out on the finals by 0.02% or something. Had an argument with the assistant coach, which didn't help anything, and learnt a lot about coaching and committees, and things I'd never been involved with before. So I quit the club at the end of that year and went to Newcastle. So that would have been 1982, I think it was, 82. I went to Newcastle, coached a side there, Western Suburbs. We went through undefeated till the second last game of the year, and the bottom side beat us. I had to work that day, couldn't get to the game. The assistant coach made a couple of bad decisions. Players lost a bit of confidence. We got done by a point. But gee, wasn't that enough to fire them up for the finals, because I was angry at them, and we went on and won the finals. We lost the second semi and we won the granny, which was nice little effort, and the next year we won the granny as well in a much harder game, but it was still nice to win. So I think I've been pretty successful as a footballer in terms of numbers of finals I've played in. I've only lost preliminary finals. I've never played in a losing grand final, strangely enough, which was rather nice. It's always good to play in grand finals. I think the most excited I was after a grand final was after we won the game at West in 72. I think that was, for me, a significant occasion. It was a close game, and I'd never won a grand final. I'd never won a final at that stage. So yes, it was a memory I'll always have, and I'll never forget that final. How I was as a footballer, well, I guess being 6'8" was enough at the start. I was able to reach the ball ahead of most of the opposition. I remember playing 18's game and have the wingman out on the, well, there wasn't a square then, but you'd have him out wide and you'd just punch the ball out to him and he'd run in and kick a goal. It was pretty simple. And I really didn't do much as a footballer other than win the taps. Probably wasn't taking a lot of marks. I guess the first year I took a few marks was when I moved into seniors at Thompson. When I went to Geelong West, I wasn't, again, it was being 6'8". I remember Goggin got Polly Farmer over, and he gave us some coaching advice and explained how the umpires never bounce it into themselves, always away. Bit dumb, you might think, but I think a lot of ruckmen even today could do with that advice, and approach the ball opposite the umpire rather than running straight at one another, and there'd probably be less injuries as well. And I guess my skills at doing that, being my height, even if they got over me early in the game, by the end of the game being 6'8", meant that I was still 6'8", and they'd stop jumping 2 feet over me back to a 6-inch jump because they were tired, and I was able to get over them later in the game. I don't think anyone beat me all game. I think I was able to get on top late in the game. And as the years went by, I got better at positioning the body and doing the things that other footballers do, picking the ball up off the ground. In fact, the last year I played at Geelong, I prided myself at being able to pick the ball up as well as a rover. I suppose that's arrogance, but I never was as good as a rover. It was just every now and then you did something and you surprised yourself. I think that if the ball was on the ground and someone was up my hammer, I used to dive at the ball and handball it as I hit it. Otherwise I was in all sorts of bother getting tackled and dragged to the ground because I was a bit slow. But I think I got a bit smarter as time went on. After the 75 grand final, I moved across to Geelong, and I think the thing that was really different for me, at Geelong West, after you kicked the football, you were waiting to see who was going to come at you, and you braced yourself, or you turned your body to make sure they didn't hurt you, and if they hit you, they went down. When I went across to Geelong, I found if I did that, I wasn't in the play. You actually had to move on, so the game was much cleaner at the AFL or the VFL level in those days, and so you actually had to keep running, and that was a big change for me, and I suppose I struggled with that for the first three or 4 years, and then 78 I actually managed to get that right. Olsen managed to, and I suppose Olsen was the only other coach that I had, and he managed to make me successful by running me really hard at the start of the season in 78, and I played 18 games that year and was reasonably successful. Unfortunately got suspended before the finals, which was really disappointing, but as I say, the difference was really just the pace of the game and being a bit stronger, and I think I learnt to be, I think I started at the end of the year in 78, I think I started to get skills, whereas up to then being 6'8" was the biggest factor. So I suppose in conclusion, it really was all about getting those skills that made me the better player when I moved to Geelong, but it took me 4 years to get where I was proficient. Warwick Yates, yes, when he came over in, I think it was 74, maybe 73, it was sort of a two-way contest between Warwick and myself, I suppose, for the ruck position. Warwick was a very difficult man to play in the ruck, and I think I was asked around that time who was the most difficult ruckman I played against, and of course I came up with Warwick Yates, which was fairly true, and Warwick probably thought the same about me. We both managed to get tangled up a few times in practice events, but Warwick's best skills were found after he got knocked out at Williamtown one day. He went up forward and he hadn't been able to kick goals most of the season, and all of a sudden he kicked, I think, 6 or 7 goals that day, and so that got Warwick out of the hair as a ruck competitor, because then he was able to play full forward or the forward pocket and managed to kick a lot of goals up there, so that sort of made it easy for me. But I think we worked fairly well. He'd ruck for part of the game, and when he got tired I'd have a go. And I think that was part of the reason we were successful. We had good rovers, good ruckmen, and both of us were able to get them to those rovers. I think Hughesy and Wolfie were exceptional rovers, and that made us look good. Even when we didn't get it right, they managed to get under it. Under Billy Goggin, I guess the thing that I learned, I'd only had 2 coaches before that, Herb Jeffries and who thought I could play better football than I was showing, and Lester Gladman had faith in me as a ruckman when I didn't have faith. But when I went across to Geelong West, Goggin took over that aspect of my career, and I guess he was looking at it from a rover's perspective on how we as a ruckman were supposed to get him the ball, and that was helpful because I think that was the first time we ever talked about that aspect. But he was a very determined man and very focused on what his goals were, and I think that helped me focus as it did for everybody else in the team. Billy busted his nose, and I can always remember when he came back from that, he was a bit timid the first game, and then at a practice session on the Saturday before the Sunday game, the ball bounced off the pack, hit him in the nose, and all of a sudden he lit up, and it didn't break his nose. He was fine. He was off like a demon. The next week he probably played one of his best games for West. I thought he was a great player, and certainly helped guide me through 72, where I was still just a naive kid, really. I was probably, 20 years of age, and yeah, he certainly helped me, steady me, taught me to kick the ball lower. I can remember giving him a hospital pass at Werribee, and I was holding my breath so that he wouldn't be crunched when the pack came down on him. It was really quite, I was expecting the big lecture afterwards, but didn't get it, so he was just happy to get an opportunity to kick a goal, and I think that was Billy's greatest asset, that he could kick goals, and he inspired the team. And even that year, I guess we were undefeated in this one game. I think we were playing Dandenong at home or somebody like that, and we're about 8 goals down at half time, and Goggins said, put us all in the medical room, said, you guys sort it out, I'm done with trying. You guys got yourself into this, get yourselves out of it. We went ahead and won the game by 3 or 4 goals. And I think that's what happens in good sides, and good sides that have had good coaching know who can take responsibility. I think the captain, the Browns, Ricky and Mark Brown, all stood up that day after that little lecture at half-time, and we went ahead and won that game very convincingly. But at half-time you wouldn't have picked us to win a game. We were playing very slow football, and we'd been through a period where we're sort of having a bit of a slump, I suppose, but we peaked just before the finals, which was always good. So I'd give Billy credit for that. In terms of opponents, I suppose the fiercest 2 opponents I played against would be Harold Martin, who quite honestly just ran at you and tried to knock you over and try and knock you out if he could. And the other bloke would have a bloke called Eddie Mealy. He cleaned me up a few times. He was certainly very fierce at the ball, and in the 75 grand final I knew he was going to come at me and try and cork my thigh. I tried to get above him. I was half successful. He only partially corked it, but late in the game I was suffering. But yeah, look, it was a great contest with any of those. And Van der Beek, the other ruckman for Dandenong, he was a bit bigger and probably harder to outreach and had a better jump than me. But yeah, they'd be the hardest 3 that I remember from those days. I mean, I don't think any game in the VFA was ever easy, and certainly not in the ruck, because everyone was trying to clean you up. I think I managed to survive most days rather than do anything startling. In terms of the toughness of the game in those days, there were all sorts of players out there that wanted to knock your block off. Tony Jewell, one day we played Caulfield at home, and he knocked out Greg Wells, I think it was, and he'd had a go at Kleiny with the elbow. And after he knocks out Wellsy, I get the runner come out from Goggins saying, you got to take him out. And I didn't need a runner to tell me what to do. If the opportunity presented itself, I would make sure that Tony Jewell was going to know that he shouldn't be going around knocking my teammates around. And fortunately for me, just shortly after the runner came out, there was a fella called Colin Arklay came running past me chasing the ball. I said to him, you get it, I'll shepherd. And Tony Jewell was chasing him. And what I did was just try and bump him front and centre with the shoulder. And he fell off me like I don't know, like a feather really. I must have got the feet planted right, but Julie had a ability to just ride the bumps, and I didn't think anything of it. And I think I was 22, and at the end of the game I found out I busted 2 of his ribs or something, and I felt totally sick that it actually damaged somebody. And I guess from that day on it changed my view of dishing it out, perhaps to a more moderate view. But generally if something happened, I'd let people know. I mean, another incident, I think it was again at Oakley, somebody hit, I can't even remember who they hit, it might have been Terry Bright, and got the runner sent out to look after him the same way as I did Jewell. So that's why I say it was unfortunate that it was just after the runner came out that I actually flattened Tony Jewell. But this time I just walked over to the bloke and I said, you better be watching for me for the rest of the game. And I don't know, he went out of the game. I didn't think I was that scary, but apparently I was. 6'8" and 100 odd kilos. Certainly later years I was another 8 or 9 kilos heavier. It certainly made a difference. I think, what was his name, Jack Dyer, said when I started playing football, my mum used to worry I might get hurt. When I finished playing football, she used to worry about who I might hurt. I don't think that was totally true for me. I didn't go out looking for trouble, but certainly I could finish it if I had to.
You've given your heart to get here and your soul to get it right. You can take 'em boots and all, but it's sure gonna take a fight. When you spend all week getting to your peak, you're gonna have your say. You bet. on Sunday. It's the real